Hello there motorsport fans, here we are, we're on your bike with Motorsport.ie. I am today, I'm in Kirkistown here, in just south of Northern Ireland, Newton in Northern Ireland. It's Ireland's fastest racetrack. It's 1.5 miles long. I'm on the main straight here and we're heading down. The first corner that we have up here is Debtor's Dip. This has been a racetrack here since 1953 when the 500 club moved in there. They had been racing it since 1948 down in Newton Airport, but the racing on the airport didn't really suit, so they moved themselves. They got the land here. Before that, the British Navy actually owned this track and it was called HMS Corncrake 2, but when they came in they built themselves. It's an old airfield, it's an old World War II airfield, like most of the tracks that they have out in England and the UK. The first corner here, Debtor's Dip, it's a flat out left-hander, and this is called Debtor's Dip because the boys in the club, when they were setting it up, they reckoned that they were going to be in debt forever, and there's no dip. Don't know where the dip came from. As I say, flat out left-hander here. You can see plenty of skid marks here from this morning's racing. The fog is actually just rolling in. We're on the Arch Peninsula, so Port of Ogie isn't only a couple of miles over that hill there, and we're south of Kirkistown, and Port of Ferry down, it's just only a few miles down the road as well. So they've had plenty of different types of racing here over the years. Plenty of famous people have raced here. 3 famous names that went on to Formula 1: Martin Donnelly, Derek Daly, and of course Fast Eddie Irvine used to race the Formula Fords here. When they started out, the club, the 500 Motor Club, they had a Cooper race car and they used to give driver tuition. This was in the days now before any sort of race school or anything was set up, so they were well ahead of their time there. And the track is more or less in its original state even today. They've added a chicane. Here we are now, we're into the right left colonial. You can see there, that's the Marshals hut over on the left. They have the barriers there. The Marshals, the weather's notorious for changing up here. It can be dry 1 minute and rain in the next. So there we're into colonial. And some of the original members of the 500 Motor Club, they ended up going to Australia. So that's why they named this corners here Colonial 1 and Colonial 2. This is Colonial 2, the left-handed kink. They ended up going to Australia, so they named the corner Colonial in honour of those lads. Then we've another fast, but everywhere is fast here in the course in Kirkistown. There's a house there on the left. Sometimes you can see people nipping out there watching a bit of racing, and the marshals usually send them back in from the safety car, but they nip back out again once the racing has started. They can sit in their garden and have a barbecue. It'd be a great place to live if you're a motorsports fan. The 1172 Ford Specials, they were a famous class here in Kirkistown for a long time, and Eric Broadley actually raced the first Lola car here in the 50s. Lola, of course, owned by Martin Baran, who owns Mondello Park now, but the very first Lola car was raced here. Here we are now, Fisherman's, which is a fast right-hander, and Fisherman's got his name because the boys, Port of Ogie is a fishing village. The lads used to come round and they would hang their nets to dry on the fencing along there. You can see another Marshals post, and then we're on to the back straight. And the back straight was originally straight all the way down 3/4 of a mile, but they added the chicane in 1970, I believe it was, the late 70s. They added the chicane here just to try and quell the speed, because it'd be a bit of an engine buster. And even on today's, if the wind is against you and you get a tow down the straight, you're going to have a much faster lap time than someone who doesn't. So the object here is to break the toe from the fellas behind, and if you can do that, it's going to be very hard for them to actually catch you. So here we are, the chicane. We're coming up to it now. As I said, it was modified, added in the late 70s. There used to be a bank that came out when I first started coming here, but they've removed that now. Obviously for safety's sake, they just put the marshal's post in there on the left. Formula Junior was a famous class that raced here, and they used to have an annual race. They used to get an awful lot of UK teams would come over and race over here. And famously in 1971, James Hunt raced here, but he actually only got as far as Fisherman's, and that race was won by Colin van der Waal in a car that was owned by Bernie Ecclestone of Bravham at the time. So we have the right left chicane, and then we're straight on down onto continuing on to the back straight. John Watson, of course, is a famous Northern Ireland racing driver, and he won his first ever single-seater race here when he raced Formula Libre. And in 1967, with the advent of Formula Ford, one of the great relationships began where Formula Ford is really synonymous with Kirkistown these days. They had their first race in 1968, which is a year after they came out. And in 1970, the Crosley S16F was a locally built car. Arnie Black built the 16F, whereas before that the boys had been racing Merlin and Lotuses. But once Arnie Black started building cars, the Formula Ford really took off here, and a lot of famous drivers have cut their teeth in Formula Ford. And even today, you get the biggest grids, most exciting action for the Formula Fords. So we're still on the back straight. The clubhouse is here. They started to do the redevelopment in 2004. They built the clubhouse. The clubhouse used to be just a small building there in the middle of the paddock, and that was opened a year later in 2005 by John Watson himself. And then they added the pit garages, they tarmacked the paddock. They've done an awful lot of work. Richard Young took over here in 1993, and he had been a member of the club here since 1961. But him and Robert Barr are the two boys who have they've really spurred on the development of the track here, and it's a great facility now. You have electrical hookups and all. As I said, you have the pit garages, the best of facilities. You can see the paddock in there on the right. It's quiet there now because it's lunchtime at the moment. Alan Drysdale has been the commentator for the last few years here in cars, but he's done bikes for an awful long time. He's the commentator now. He's a long time member of the 500 Motor Club. We're coming up here now. This little dip in here, this is for karts and sprints. They have a couple of rally sprints in the winter, and they have an actual rally here. So there's plenty of stuff, and you'd often see even nowadays, you might see a plane landing at lunchtime, and it just parks off here on the inside as we come up. This is called Maguire's hairpin, and they're not too sure exactly why it's called Maguire's hairpin. They possibly are for a marshal, or there was a Maguire on the results sheet from the very first race win here back in the early days of the track. Now this is a great hairpin. There's two lines into this. You can take the wide line to the left, cut in tight and go wide on the other side, or come in tight here and drift it out further. And famously in the late 80s and 90s, Michael Swan and Hilton Hinks. Swan on the big bike, the 1000cc, Hinks on the 250, and they would both take opposite lines as they came around, and to try and drag each other to the line. This is the pit lane entrance now. You can see the scrutiny shed there just over on the right hand side. All the new facilities that they have here. We're back onto the straight. Philip Shields holds the outright record here. It is 51.105. Sorry, is the outright lap record. That's in the GP2 car, and he actually owns the saloon car lap record here as well, which is 62.256. So Philip Shields is a local man, well known for racing here, and he's the fastest man in Kirkistown, which is Ireland's famous fastest racetrack. The pit garages there, you can see they're only there the last year or two. We come up now, this on the left here, that's part of the karting track and it's used for the sprints as well. This is the back of the grid. 26 car grid here in Kirkistown. The control tower is the same, that's been there for a long time. And Alan Drysdale, the commentator, he sits up in the little box up on the top. So it's good to see the sun out here in Kirkistown. And always sun shines always at some stage, but you always usually get a bit of rain as well. So that's your lap of Kirkistown. This has been Cregor on your bike for Motorsport.ie.